Hello and welcome to Fix the Senate Now, brought to you by Democracy Initiative. I am Reverend Dr. Stephanie Rose Spalding, the founder of Truth and Conciliation Commission, as well as your MC for this session of the Teach In today. We are beyond excited to have you all here this afternoon, or depending on what time zone you're in, this day with us. We have so much information that we are communicating, translating, and sharing with all of you all out here in Cyberland with us. It's my pleasure to introduce the trainer extraordinaire. She is the movement building coordinator for Democracy Initiative. And she's just an amazing human being. Like, this Black girl magic that's coming your way is just awesome. Brittany Baxter is a Maryland-based consultant and organizer, as well as the principal consultant for Ladders to Success, LLC. She has worked with a number of organizations across the country. Recently, she organized in various capacities with the Broward County for coordinated efforts to elect Andrew Gillum, and partnership with the Wellstone Action Program, or formerly Wellstone Action, to provide training for progressive Democrats, their campaign managers, and grassroots organizers to run and win effective campaigns. We need you all to run and win effective campaigns. And so you need the expertise of someone like Brittany Baxter. She is also a trainer for the National Democratic Training Committee. She is a strong supporter of labor and a former AFT organizer for NYSUT. She is committed to the fight for equity for all, and she says she stands with the poor, people of color, LGBTQ folks, immigrants, and organized labor, because our liberation is bound together. Again, it is my pleasure to introduce to you, for this segment, Brittany Baxter.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Spalding. Your words are too kind. I hope that I can live up to the hype. So again, welcome to Fixing the Senate Now, folks, why Senate governance matters to all of us. As the Reverend Doctor said, my name is Brittany Baxter. I'm the Training and Movement Building Coordinator for the Democracy Initiative, and I am so excited to be here with you all today. So today we're going to talk about the filibuster in Senate governance and why you should care about it, because as unsexy as it sounds, it really is an issue that impacts all of the work that we all do, right? We all come to this movement because of issues that we want to transform and move forward to improve the lives of the people that we love and care about, and folks that we may never meet, right? But the filibuster has long been the roadblock in this work that we all come together to advance. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. We're going to talk about the history behind it and how we're going to defeat this thing together. So I'm excited for you all to come on this journey with me. So let's go ahead and just jump in a bit. So before we get started on the filibuster, I want to talk to you all a little bit about the organization that I have spent the last 2 years working with, the Democracy Initiative Education Fund, right? The work that we do is to bring all of the folks in this movement together to talk about democracy and from an intersectional lens, right? We often think of democracy as this abstract idea, right? But the reality is democracy manifests in our lives in very different ways, depending on the systems of oppression that impact us. And so what we do at the Democracy Initiative is we bring together the coalition of the willing, of 45 million strong folks who want to make our government work for us, who want to protect and expand our voting rights with the goal of achieving 75% participation in the democratic process, right? And we want to get big money out of politics, right? We've long standed with the folks who are fighting to end Citizens United and to repeal other laws that allow corporations to control and own our elections. And then we want to achieve fair representation, right? At the DI, we have a saying, the most oppressed lead the best. And we recognize that those who are the furthest removed from our democracy are the ones with the answers for how we create a democracy that is rooted in liberty and justice for all of us, right? So Would love for you all to just check us out. If you want to learn more, we offer trainings. We engage with anyone who wants to get a deeper understanding of democracy, reform, work, and how we can engage and shift the space to be more inclusive. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're around, and we're happy to bring new folks into the democracy fight. Now that you have an understanding about my org and the work that we do and how we come to this work, let's dive in. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're just going to really do a deep dive into the basics of the filibuster and just like the infrastructure, how it plays a role in the machine that is Congress, right? So first, we're going to do a quick icebreaker. I want to get a sense of folks. I want you all to share what inspires your activism, right? After that, we're going to talk a little bit about governance, what it actually means. And then we'll dive into the filibuster itself, right? The big bad wolf in the room that we're all coming together to learn about. And then we'll shift to why democracy matters and why it's so crucial to making sure that Senate governance is driven by our democratic values, right? After that, we're going to share some rules for effective conversations with you all. And then we want you all to go out and practice these rules later, right? And then we'll talk about how all of this leads to you stepping up and into the fight in new and interesting ways. Because all of this, it doesn't matter if we're not sharing that information with folks who don't have access to these spaces and engaging the everyday people whose lives are most impacted by this work. So let's go ahead and dive in. And before we dive in, I do want to apologize. Y'all, I'm from New York. I'm from the western part of New York, and so I speak fast and slow at the same time. So I'll try to just modulate that for y'all because I know I have a tendency to do the things. So if you all are ready, let's dive in. So first, we really just want to get a deeper understanding of what governance means and why it matters so that you have a framing of how deeply broken the Senate is. We all know, even just from this last 4 years, how dysfunctional the Senate has been, even witnessing the dysfunction of the Senate under President Obama, right? But it goes much deeper than that. And so we're going to just touch on that really quickly so that folks have we have the same foundational understanding of what we're dealing with, right? Because we can't defeat a monster if we don't know its weaknesses and how it functions. Okay. Once we get a deeper understanding of what governance means, then we're going to shift to understanding the filibuster itself, right? It like many things in this country, like many tools of oppression that exist in this country, is rooted in white supremacy. And then we're going to talk about its evolution to how it's used today to block needed change that has the public support and bipartisan support. And then we're going to just talk about how to have conversations about the filibuster in a really powerful way so that we can take this information back to folks who aren't necessarily in this space and who are busy living their daily lives and can't engage the way they would like to. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to move folks to action, because again, all of this comes back to building the army that's going to force the change that we all seek to achieve. Okay. All right. So the icebreakers, I want folks like just drop in your chat your names, your pronouns, the organization and city that you're in, and then think about one change that you want to achieve through your activism, right? What is the issue that brings you to this fight and keeps you running every day, even though you're tired, even though you're grumpy, even though it may not pay what you needed to pay, right? What is it that brings you to this work? And if you could do anything in a blink of an eye, what is the one change that you would have that you would affect through your activism? So go ahead and share that. I'll give you all a minute, less than a minute, and then we'll go ahead and jump in. Usually I would play a little John Coltrane as folks do this, but you know, that's a little more complicated in these bigger trainings. Okay, now that folks have shared all of that information, we are family. So now we're going to talk about this in real, straightforward, honest terms, because that's what family does. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to click over to the next slide. All right, now governance. Let's just touch on what the basic definition for governance is. So governance is the act or process of governing or overseeing the control and direction of something, like a country, an organization. And the reality is governance is what happens. We spend a lot of time and energy on electing folks, to office, but not as much time as ensuring that they have the skills and the understanding of the system so they can govern effectively and fairly and equitably. And so governance really is about the structure and the policy, and it's much longer lasting and long standing than a president or a senator, right? The bills that are passed, the way that they legislate, it continues on beyond them. And the filibuster is a prime example of something that of a governance tool that exists and persists long after its creators have established it, right? And so as we think about governance, right, we have to think about how we use that to tap into how the votes that we fight to engage and to direct, how that translates into the actual change we want. Because we elect people because we want them to go in and represent our interests, right? And a lot of times we see folks elected that have the desire, but not the understanding and the governance skills and tools and tactics to navigate the space to advance the work that we want to see advanced. Okay, so because this is the filibuster and Senate governance for newbies, we're going to do a quick civic engagement lesson for folks. Because if you went to school after I did, you probably didn't get a deep dive into civics. So we're just going to make up for the American school system right here. So we understand the Constitution is what oversees the three branches of government, our legislative, executive, and judicial branches, right? Today, we're focusing on the legislative branch, which is Congress, and it's broken up. It is a bicameral Congress, which means it is a two-house Congress. And so we have the Senate, which is the higher house, and then we have the House of Representatives. And so what happens is that our House of Representatives, they have a bill, they push it through, they vote on it, and then it goes to the Senate to determine whether or not it will be passed through both houses, right? And the Senate is largely where all of these bills, the progressive bills, go to die, right? If y'all will give me 1 second, I have an 8-year-old here who doesn't understand that mommy is working, so give me 1 second. Sorry, folks. Working in a pandemic has made things really interesting, and I appreciate all of your patience. So really, we're focusing on the legislative branch, but the executive branch is our president, our vice president, and their cabinet, right? And so they can execute executive orders. They can veto congressional bills that they don't deem necessary or fair or equitable, right? And then we have our judicial branch, our Supreme Court, and the infrastructure of the federal courts, which we see is a really important part of the infrastructure. And we saw that, I think, in under our last presidential term, how really important and underappreciated organizing in that space is. But today, as I said before, we are focused on the legislative branch because that is the branch that has cost us the most time when it comes to advancing our progressive agenda. So, just to recap, folks, now that we have an understanding of what governance actually looks like, it's important to note that, like in a democracy, our governance should reflect our democratic values. And what we're not seeing is our democratic values being reflected in the way that our governance is taking place in this country. It's largely dysfunctional, it's largely partisan, and it's incredibly harmful to most of us. It's not representative of the needs and the desires and the values of the American people. And so this is just another quick question that I want folks to figure out. I want you to think about this. What does democracy mean to you? Because what you think democracy means and it looks like, it determines how you think we should be governing in this country. So go ahead and think about that as we continue on, because it's going to be relevant as we start to dive deeper into the filibuster and its impact. All right, and if you see me looking away, I have 2 screens. So I'm still here with you all. I'm just making sure that I can see because my eyes have gotten so bad, y'all, but it's all good. So let's talk about how the Senate governance is broken, right? Because we know it's dysfunctional, but how does that translate into the sabotage of bills that have bipartisan support, right? let's look at the $15 minimum wage, right? It was dropped from the pandemic relief bill in the Senate in 2021. The Affordable Care Act, given the option for the public option for healthcare to give folks an opportunity to purchase affordable public market insurance, that was dropped in 2009 from the Affordable Care Act, right? The DREAM Act, it died in the Senate. It's been killed in the Senate multiple times under Mitch McConnell. And the For the People Act, which is HR Bill 1, Senate Bill 1, which is the democracy reform bill that we need in order to right the wrongs that have chipped away at our democracy. And it died in the Senate in 2019 and 2020 and that Congress, right? And then we have the Climate Action Now Act, which is clearly something that we have to address because it not only impacts our country, it impacts the future of our world, right? And that died in the Senate in the 2019-2020 session, right? Expanded background checks for gun purchases. We are the only first world country in the world that consistently sees mass shootings. And we fail to address gun reform. Not because Americans don't want it. There's bipartisan support for it, but because there are interests that impede on these bills advancing so that we can protect ourselves, our children, and just ensure that folks are qualified to have a weapon. And so you can see, right, this isn't any just one sector that's being impacted by us. Progressive issues, not even progressive issues, common sense legislation is being killed in what we call Mitch McConnell's graveyard, right? And so now that we have been able to shift, it's important to know that there's still, even though we've taken the House, even though we have the majority in the Senate, the filibuster is still empowered to end all of this, right? And that is where we come in, because now that we understand this and we have at least leveled the playing field a bit, we need to work to take the filibuster off the field. So as we continue, I know this is just a screenshot of some of the issues that have been stopped by the filibuster and by our dysfunctional Senate. Think about some more. Think about the issues that matter to you that you've watched be impacted, right? And keep those in your mind as we continue to go throughout the training. All right, so what's the filibuster, right? There's this idea, this Hollywood idea of like the filibuster, passionate legislators standing on the floor, talking until they lose their voices to defend a bill or the interests of their constituents. But the reality is the filibuster is something entirely different. And so we have a phenomenal video that we're gonna play for you all that was created by Color of Change that gives you the really, really, just like the nitty gritty of its inception and how it's been weaponized and how it continues to exacerbate the dysfunction of our Senate. So if we could go ahead and play that video.
The Jim Crow filibuster, the tool that gives guys like this the power to single-handedly kill legislation that can help you, your family, and your friends live better, safer lives. It was used to give more power to slave states before the Civil War, to deny minimum wage increases, to delay civil rights protections, to stop the Voting Rights Act, and to block making lynching a federal crime. Seriously. They say, but reforming the filibuster would erase bipartisanship. Actually, it's the filibuster that's holding bipartisanship back. Consider immigration reform like the DREAM Act and universal background checks for gun purchases. Both had bipartisan support to pass, if not for, you guessed it, the Jim Crow filibuster. It doesn't have to be this way. We can make Congress work for us, but that push starts with us, the people. And it starts right now.
And so, as you learned in the video, right, like the filibuster is just like many things,
the tool
rooted
that gives
in
guys like
white
this
supremacy
the power to
and oppression And it's super important to recognize that what something is rooted in will always manifest in the fruit, right? And so let's not forget that the filibuster, although it was created to historically reinforce white supremacy, it has now evolved to oppress the majority, right? The shared interest of Americans is being sabotaged by something that initially was designed to support white supremacy and enslavement. And so that saying that if they come for one, they will come for all really should resonate here, because the filibuster is a prime example of something being used to oppress one group, then morphing into something that is used to oppress the majority, right? So let's not forget how it started. And I'd recommend that folks, you check out, Demos did a phenomenal report on the filibuster, and just the way that it's been really weaponized to prevent us from advancing the interests of the many, right? So keep this in mind as we continue to dive into this. Let's talk a bit about how the use of the filibuster has exploded, right? So after President Obama was elected, we saw a huge spike in the use of the filibuster, right? To sabotage many bills, including healthcare, and gun reform, but also to force through bills that are incredibly harmful and only supported by the minority, which we'll see represented in the next slide, right? So think about this, right? Think about the issues that we were fighting for between 2007 and 2015, and anything that failed, it's very likely that the filibuster was the reason that bill, that issue, was silenced. Now, we already know that the filibuster is a tool of white supremacy, but even worse, well, you don't get much worse than white supremacy. But to make it even worse, the filibuster is fundamentally anti-democratic, right? So let's just look at a map of the country. Most Americans live in the states that are highlighted in yellow. We have 22 senators representing the majority of Americans. There are 78 senators representing 48% of America's population, more than three times as many that represent 52% of America's population. And the Senate, which is already unrepresented by design, is exacerbated by the filibuster, because then these 78 senators can block anything that is supported by the majority of the country. And we've seen that. We've seen it many times over. And so what does this mean? This means that the filibuster, even just by existing, right, it goes beyond the bills that are actually blocked and killed by the filibuster. It narrows the limits of what even gets to the floor. And so that means that if there's a gun reform bill that we can't even get to the floor, that means we can't even have a conversation. We can't even push a bill to the floor to address it, because it's already been killed by the filibuster, right? And so this is it's frustrating, but we have hope. As stressful as this may be, let's just recognize that the tide is turning. And here's just another example of how the filibuster is fundamentally anti-democratic, right? It allows the minority, the very small minority, to set the agenda, right? And the comparison here is California has 39 million people and Wyoming has a little over 500,000. Wyoming gets 3 electoral votes per 194,000 Wyomingites. And California has 55 electoral votes for each 725,000 folks. California gets 1 electoral vote, and so does Wyoming. So you can see how unfair that is to the voices of Californians and to the interests of the majority. So this is a very real thing that we have to contend with, and we've seen repeatedly, right, throughout even recent history, how this has been used to block our interests. But no more, y'all, because last year we saw that Americans voted in record numbers, and we have to see if we're going to actually see the changes that we voted for. And that means it's time for us to defend democracy and to fix the Senate. Now, what does that look like? It looks like you going and having conversations with everyone you know and talking to them about the filibuster. Connect the dots between the filibuster and the issues that matter to them, right? So here are some tips for having effective conversations with folks. It's not about lecturing, right? We have a tendency in the progressive space to lead from an institutional knowledge and intellectual perspective, but the reality is people understand issues when you connect them to their lives, right? So how are we connecting the filibuster to someone's worldview and their lived experiences and allowing them to connect the dots while we foster that understanding, right? So first you have to figure out what actually matters to the person. What do they care about? Do they care about their kids? Do they care about their parents? Do they care about their ability to retire and actually be able to take care of themselves? Do they care about the climate? Do they care about gentrification? What is the issue that matters? And then find the way to connect the dots between the filibuster and how that impacts the progression of the issues that they care about. After that, once you've made these connections with the filibuster and the issues, you have to ensure that they have an understanding and they are equipped with identifying when misinformation comes up, because we know that misinformation is a tool that is largely used to scare people from taking action. And so you have to point them to resources. So Color of Change, Democracy Initiative. We have this training is just a shorter version of our hour-long training where we actually walk folks through how to have these conversations. And then we model them for them, right? So we identify how do you deal with someone who says, well, I heard the filibuster would prevent us from advancing certain things, right? How do you navigate that? And how do you direct folks to identifying truth and lies so that they can then go on and do that themselves, so they're not spreading that misinformation? And then you just kind of gauge how interested this person is in engaging in the fight. Are they super excited? Are they ready to go march on the Senate tomorrow? Or are they open to having conversations with other folks and maybe sending some emails, having conversations with folks in their network? And once you evaluate that, then you can make an appropriate ask. Someone who's willing to march on the Senate, invite them to your next lobby day, right? Encourage them to organize calls to your senators so that they're moving their networks to make demands and put pressure on the electeds who have say in how this fight goes forward, right? If there's someone who's just a little less emphatic about this, have them invite folks to a training. At least share that so that they can expand their understanding and they can give that information to other folks, right? It doesn't matter because there is a space at every level of this fight for folks to get plugged into. You just have to invite them to participate in a way that's comfortable for them, right? The idea is that we meet people where they are. We have to meet people where they are so that we can engage them in truly intentional ways and not transactional ways. So once you've had these conversations, we want you to go out and practice, and then we want you to think about these three things. This is how you evaluate if your conversations were successful. Identify the best part of the conversation. Was there a moment where you saw the light switch on in the other person's eyes? Was there just an issue that really excited them and they realized that the filibuster is the reason that they haven't been able to advance gun control or climate justice or whatever the issue is that really lands on their heart, right? And then think about, okay, you know that you're going to make mistakes. What would help you be more effective? Is it more practice? Is it engaging with other folks? Is it doing a little more research? Participating in a democracy initiative training? Who knows? Whatever would make you more effective, just reflect on that and then continue to practice, because you get better with the more conversations you have, because you get a deeper understanding of how people are going to respond to what you're saying and to this information. So I want you to keep all of this in mind, right? As you go forth and conquer, because we have established a landscape in which we can move this forward and we can fire the filibuster. So here are just three examples of things that you can ask folks to do and that you can also engage in, right? You can sign a petition. I know the Democracy Initiative, we are pushing forth a petition calling on folks to support the end of the filibuster. We're engaging with Congress members, right? So Congressmember Sinema in Arizona, Congressmember Manchin in West Virginia, your Congress members, if you live in New York, you need to call on Chuck Schumer to encourage him to continue to pushing to end the filibuster. And wherever you are, engage your Congress members, see where they stand on the filibuster, and call them to action. And then, of course, again, I have to plug our trainings because we've worked really hard on them, and we really enjoy engaging with folks who don't necessarily come into the democracy space on how to engage in a way that is meaningful and appropriate for you. So you can reach out to us, send me an email. Happy to or host an organizational training or to engage with your members, right? So there's so many ways that you can plug in because this fight is going to take all of us. We're so thankful that you all came and participated today. I hope that this was helpful for you. And if you want more resources, we also have a toolkit that we're sharing with folks that is a breakdown. It's a super, it's a deep dive into the filibuster and all things that we can do to engage on social media, to engage in our organizations, and to engage our networks. So we hope that you take this and run with it. And thank you for being here. Remember, democracy can only be for the people, by the people. Anything less than that is unacceptable. Thank you all for being here. We're excited to have you, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future.
Good afternoon, day, whatever time of day that you are logging on in cyberspace with us and the time zone that you're coming in. It is Fix Your Senate Now, brought to you by the Democracy Initiative. We are so glad to have you being with us, present, learning about all the different things that will advance our Senate, because right now it is broken. I am Reverend Dr. Stephanie Rose Spalding, the founder of the Truth and Conciliation Commission, an MC for this portion of the Teach-In, and we hope that you all are learning a lot of good information. And thank you for those who have stayed with us throughout this day. You all are in for a treat with our next presenter. She is phenomenal, Black girl magic personified. Someone needs to get her a Black Girls Rock award, because she definitely does. She is a trainer and movement building coordinator for Democracy Initiative. She is based in Maryland, a consultant and organizer, the principal consultant for Ladders to Success LLC. She has worked with C3s and C4s, so if your nonprofit needs some help in building momentum and your movement, please tap her on the shoulder. Prior to 2018 midterm elections, she managed statewide programs in partnership with Repower, formerly Wellstone Action, to provide training for progressive Democrats, their campaign managers, and grassroots organizers to run and win effective campaigns. We need you to run and win effective campaigns. She's also a National Democratic Training Committee trainer. This woman knows so much, so please tap into her energy today. And without further ado, I don't want to take up any more time, but I present to you Brittany Baxter, trainer extraordinaire for Democracy Initiative.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Spalding. It has been such a pleasure to work with you and to engage in the democracy space with folks who come to this work with a desire to bring together the intersecting issues that bind us all. I'm really excited to be here. As the good Reverend Doctor said, my name is Brittany Baxter. I'm the Training Movement Building Coordinator for the Democracy Initiative. If you haven't heard of us, I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, our work, and why we do democracy differently. So let's get started, y'all. The Democracy Initiative Education Fund, I've been with for 2 years, and we are a coalition of 76 national partner organizations, from the NAACP to the Sierra Club to Friends of the Earth to, I'm blanking because there's so many amazing groups that we get to work with, right? To the government groups like Common Cause. We bring all of these folks together to really just advance democracy from the lens of intersecting needs and the shared interest in moving progressive issues forward, right? And so we are committed to making our government work for us, protecting and expanding our voting rights. We have a goal of 75% participation in the democratic process. And part of that, that means we have to get rid of big money in politics, right? We have to end Citizens United. We have to ensure that corporations are not treated as individuals with interests, right? And then we also want to achieve fair representation. The core value of the Democracy Initiative is to look at democracy and the organizing work that we do with a clear race-class analysis. We recognize that the interests of folks differ based on where they fall within the systems of oppression. And it's important to remember that the folks farthest removed from our democracy are the ones who need to be prioritized. And they're also the ones who know what it looks like to bring them back into the fold, right? So we believe that the most oppressed lead the best, and everything we do at the Democracy Initiative models that belief. So super excited to be here with you all today to talk about an issue that I have learned so much about, even in just engaging in this space. It is Senate governance and the filibuster, y'all. So today we're going to talk a little bit, let's just run through the agenda really quickly so we can dive right in. I know that this particular training, this session, is designed for folks who have an understanding of how the Senate works, who participated in lobbying, who have been activists for a while. And so we're going to skip some of that Senate Governance 101 civics, American civics class, and go straight to the nitty gritty and the meat of what we're fighting for today. Right. So first, I want to get a sense of what inspires your activism, what brings you to this space, and what keeps you going even when you're tired and exhausted and broken from all of the losses and the hits that we've taken. Right. And then we're going to talk about, like, what is governance and what is it supposed to actually be? And what are we seeing now? And then we'll do a quick dive into the concept of the filibuster, its racist origins, and how it's morphed today to be a weapon that defeats the interests of the majority in this country. After that, we'll talk a bit about why it matters so much, like why it matters and what it should look like in a true democracy, and how the filibuster has been a real barrier to change that we all desire to have. And then we'll just go over rules for having conversations about this. Like, you know this, I know this, but what about all of the friends and family members that we have who don't understand these things, right? How do we talk about this in a way that's meaningful and doesn't come from kind of a superior perspective, right? And overbearing intellectual conversations are not effective. We have to touch people where they are, and we'll talk about, I'll share some just like some tips and tricks you can use to engage effectively, right? And then we're going to talk about the ways that you can step up, right? Participating today is just one way that you can step up and engage in this fight to defeat the filibuster, but there are so many ways that we can pull you into the fight and really get folks engaged, fired up, and ready to go. So now that we know what we're doing today, let's dive in. So folks, right, like as I said, we want to deepen our understand the filibuster, and then sharpen these conversations so that we can move folks to action. That's what matters, getting people the foundational understanding so that they can move and make decisions on their own as a part of this movement. So what I'd like for everyone to do now, because I believe that when I bring folks together for a training, that we become family, I want you all to share your names and pronouns, the organization or the city you're in, and I want you to answer this question. How has the filibuster sabotaged an advocacy issue that you care about and have worked on? And I just want you all to share that with each other. I'll give you a little bit to type that into the chat, and then we'll keep going. Okay, now that we're all cousins, let's talk about what we're here to talk about, folks. Right, so governance and democratic values, right? We may not realize this, but governance is intertwined into our democratic values, right? If this is a democracy, then the way that we govern should reflect those values. The people should be represented. Their interests should be advanced, right? Special interests should not be able to dictate what legislation is viable and what legislation is killed, right? And so I want you all to think about what your ideal democracy looks like. What does that look like? Is it like a combination of Wakanda and, and just like, New Zealand? Because that's honestly that's my ideal democracy, right? A Wakanda that gives folks gun control when they ask for it. It gives parents time off without having to beg for it, compromising their children versus their jobs. It is a place where people are taken care of and are accountable to each other. I'd love to hear what your ideal democracies look like. So go ahead and type that in the chat as well. And remember, right? Our demands are that our governance should match the democratic values that we hear come out of the mouths of our legislators, right? There's a lot of talking, but the action is not matching up with the democratic values that this country was founded on. So we all know that Senate governance is broken because we've been in this fight advancing all of these issues, right? $15 minimum wage, the public option for healthcare, the DREAM Act, the For the People Act, which would be the anchor democracy reform bill that would transform our democracy and get us on the road to being a real democracy, not just in the way we talk about it, but in the way that we show up. And like climate action, right? Gun control, all of these issues are things that affect us individually and affect our communities. And these are things that we have joined together and demanded change on. And we've seen it blocked. We've seen them blocked consistently, right? We've seen the $15 minimum wage dropped from the pandemic relief bill. We've seen the DREAM Act killed in the Senate multiple times. We've seen the For the People Act die in the Senate, but that doesn't matter because it's coming back up and we have a shot to pass it this session, right? And really, gun control, something that should be common sense, not bipartisan at all in any way, because we've watched our children be murdered in school. We've watched folks go to a county fair and watch it turn into just like a scene of terror. And as the only first world country on this globe that continues to see these things become commonplace, right? We have failed to address these in a way that protects the interests of the many. So I just want you all to make sure that we keep this in mind, because the filibuster is an integral piece in blocking these issues that are common sense, that have public support, that are constantly seeing being brought to the feet of our legislators who are elected to represent our interests, right? So, Color Change has done a phenomenal, just quick video that surmises the filibuster and why we really can't have nice things, because it is the filibuster's fault, right? This tool of white supremacy has morphed into a weapon, the weapon that is essentially the atom bomb of Senate governance tools to kill any legislation that could advance and change this country for the better. So I want to go ahead and cue that up. Y'all, we're going to watch this video and then I'll come back.
The Jim Crow Filibuster, the tool that gives guys like this the power to single-handedly kill legislation that can help you, your family, and your friends live better, safer lives. It was used to give more power to slave states before the Civil War, to deny minimum wage increases, to delay civil rights protections, to stop the Voting Rights Act, and to block making lynching a federal crime. Seriously. They say, but reforming the filibuster would erase bipartisanship. Actually, it's the filibuster that's holding bipartisanship back. Consider immigration reform like the DREAM Act and universal background checks for gun purchases. Both have bipartisan support to pass, if not for, you guessed it, the Jim Crow filibuster. It doesn't have to be this way. We can make Congress work for us, but that push starts with us, the people. And it starts right now.
So as you've seen in the video, what started out as a tool to empower slave owners and white supremacists who want to maintain a system of oppression, as I say many times, right? They came for one of us, and then they used that to come for all of us. And so as the filibuster has evolved, right, it's turned into something that has blocked all of the work that we fight on behalf of our communities to advance, right? And so the filibuster, there's this myth, this idea that the filibuster is a tool that's used by legislators who are passionate about defending the issues that matter to their constituents, and they'll stand on the floor and argue passionately until their voices go hoarse and their waters run out without eating or using the restroom. And that is just simply not true. The talking filibuster is not a thing anymore. The filibuster's reality is that it was used to advance and protect slavery and reinforce white supremacy. And now, after blocking not just and defending slavery, but also blocking anti-lynching bills, while Black Americans were subjected to racial terror across this country, it has evolved into blocking any legislation that could improve the lives of Black folks, brown folks, poor folks, rural folks, urban folks, all of us. All of us are impacted by this. Our lives are impacted by the lack of action that has been taken to end the filibuster. If you want more information and resources, I strongly recommend that you go and check out the report that Demos did on ending the filibuster. We're happy to share that out. It's super crucial that you just get a deeper understanding of the filibuster and what its intent is, so that you can defend against the ending the filibuster, because it has to go if we're going to be able to advance the issues that matter to us. And not just us, because this is not a progressive fight. This is a fight for democracy and for the heart of our country. So, as you all, I'm sure you can attest, use of the filibuster has exploded, right? From 2007, we've seen a rapid increase and explosion, and it really isn't. It's not a bipartisan thing, right? So this graph really just kind of speaks to the party that has been really using the filibuster as a way to kill issues and legislation that are being demanded and supported by members of their party. And we have to recognize that this tool that was at its inception was a white supremacist tool. It still is, and is being used to prevent us from moving forward. So let's talk about the filibuster in democracy, right? We recognize that the filibuster itself is fundamentally anti-democratic, and it makes an already dysfunctional Senate even worse. So this is just let's look at this map of America, right? The yellow states are where the majority of Americans live. 52% of Americans live in these yellow states. There are 3 times as many states in maroon, and those states have 48% of the population. The yellow states have 22 congressional senators. The majority of the population is represented by 22 senators. 48% of the population is represented by more than 3 times as many, 78 senators. And so that gives them a very small minority, is empowered to dictate what happens to the majority of Americans, even when those interests are not aligned, and when we're demanding the complete opposite of what is being advanced. So just think about that for a minute. Think about that. Less than half of the country is represented by 3 times as many senators as the majority of the country. And when you understand that, you can see how it has been so difficult for us to advance legislation and to advance issues that matter to the majority of us, that have public support, that have bipartisan support, because it is special interests and a small minority that get to dictate what passes through the Senate and what becomes law. And it's important to note, right? Like, it's not just that, but it's also the reality that the filibuster's impact goes beyond bills that are actually filibustered. It narrows the limits of what even gets to the floor. And so we might not even be able to talk about gun control in the session, right? Now, think about how that impacts how legislative session goes, what we're able to advance, what we can even engage and interact with Congress members on. If we can't even get bills to the floor, we can't put the pressure on them to vote for a bill that can't get to the floor. And so think about how this has really just been a tool of sabotage to prevent the people's demands and the people's choices to be erased and ignored. Think about an issue that you have advocated for, that it's clear that it's a common sense issue that people can agree on, that still fell flat and died in Mitch McConnell's Senate, right? Think about that. Keep that in your head as we dive a little deeper into how undemocratic the filibuster is, right? We know that California has about 40 million people. Wyoming has 500,000 folks. The 55 electoral votes that California has represents about 725,000 folks. For Wyoming, the 3 electoral votes they have, each vote represents 194,000 folks. Each of those states gets 1 electoral vote. That means the 40 million Californians are represented, are equal, only have the same vote as Wyoming, which only has 500,000 people. How is that representative and democratic? It's not, and we know it isn't. And the filibuster, really, again, I just want to reiterate this. It allows a small minority of folks who are disconnected from the realities of most of us to dictate what our democracy looks like. And so as you think about all of this, you think about the issues that you've advocated for, you put your body on the line for, that you've seen impact people that you love. Just know that while this is all a lot, this system is not designed for us to be in power. We have power, and we wielded that power last year, right? We saw Americans voted in record numbers last year, despite voter suppression, all of the tactics to block, despite a pandemic, 100-year pandemic, where we witnessed unimaginable loss of life and suffering. Through all of that, Americans came together to speak on and to have our voices heard about what we want our democracy to look like. So now the question is, will we get to see the changes that we voted for? It's time to defend our democracy and to fix our Senate. And we do that by firing the filibuster. So I want to take you all through just how to actually talk about this with folks who may not be in this space, who may not have any idea what the filibuster is, right? Because it's important for us to bring this information in a really intentional and authentic way to folks who can mobilize, right? And so in order for us to do that, here are just some effective tips on how to have these conversations. As I'm sure most of you have had conversations like this before, these are just some reminders and refreshers on how you can engage intentionally and effectively to meet people where they are so that the information lands, that seed is planted, and it begins to bloom and it turns into action, because that's what we want. We're having these conversations. We're spending a Saturday talking to each other on Zoom, even though we're all zoomed out, because we want to move people to action, right? So think about it as you enter these conversations with folks in your networks, as you start to talk about the filibuster and why folks should care. All right. Remember, this isn't a lecture. You ask questions, you tease out what issues and concerns sit on that person's heart. I like to think about what I ask folks is like, what are the things that keep you up at night? Before you go to sleep, what's the last thing you think about? Is it making sure that your child adjusts back to school and they're safe once we go back to in-person school? Is it thinking about that family member that now that they have COVID, that's a pre-existing condition, will they be able to get health care? Is it knowing that you've seen folks in your community lose jobs, and as we begin to open back up, will they be able to find a job that pays them well? Or will they be forced to go back to the restaurant industry where they're not paid a living wage? And they also have to take care of family members who can't work, right? Like, what is the issue that sits on that person's heart? And then how can you connect the filibuster and the filibuster's impact on the legislation and the issues that would move to improve their lives? And then as you make those connections, right, you should see a light go on, right? Think about that and continue to build on that, right? Because once you've tapped into the heart of the matter, that is what will drive people's desire to engage, right? But after that, once you've kind of flipped that switch, a lot of folks have already heard some misinformation and may have some concerns or doubts about engaging in this fight and about the filibuster. And so you have to make sure that you yourself are fully educated or educated to a point where you can address any misinformation, and you can educate them and identify ways that they can go and advance their learning, right? Checking out the Color of Change video, reading the Demos report. We at the Democracy Initiative spent the last month and a half developing a really in-depth social media toolkit and just filibuster toolkit that provides resources from our 76 partners in different spaces doing different work and how the filibuster impacts climate justice work, how the filibuster impacts the work that folks are doing around racial justice and police reform, and how it impacts workers, right, and organized labor. These are the tools that you can use to shore up your responses when folks bring their concerns and doubt to you, because we have to eliminate the fear so that folks have the courage to step up and demand change, right? And then once you've done that and they're confident you're in a place, start to tease out their level of interest and support. Is this someone who's gung-ho, ready to hit the streets tomorrow with a face mask, some hand sanitizer, and a clipboard to have conversations with folks? Or is this someone who wants to learn a little bit more and will engage in a way that makes them comfortable, right? Once you've assessed their level of support and their interest, then you can direct them to an appropriate ask, right? Someone who's ready to go, invite them to a lobby day so that they can call their senators and demand that they support the filibuster and put pressure on their fellow legislators to get in line, right? Or it could be come attend a democracy initiative training where we actually practice having these conversations so that you can get a deeper understanding about how to navigate all of the things that will come up in the conversation, right? So that you can be more comfortable. Or maybe it's hosting a house party where you write postcards or you sign petitions, right? There's so many ways that people can get involved. It's important to just tease out what they're comfortable with so you can plug them in anywhere in the fight. Every action matters and it contributes to pushing us forward, right? So I hope these were super helpful for y'all. And once you've had these conversations, after every conversation, you should reflect a bit, right? What was the best part of the conversation? Do you remember the moment where the person, that light switched on and you connected the filibuster to the issue that mattered most to them, right? And you saw their body language change and got excited, right? What did you find most challenging? Was it difficult for you to tease out what mattered to them? Or did you struggle with really kind of explaining the filibuster? Because it's a really technical thing that unless you're a policy wonk, it doesn't really land well. Did you struggle explaining it? What kind of tips and tools do you need, right? How can you be more effective? So thinking about all of those things will help you as you continue to practice having these conversations and engage with folks, right? And then ask those folks for their feedback. How did that conversation make you feel? Do you feel like I was able to explain this well? Do you feel like now you want to be a part of this fight in a way that you hadn't engaged before? How can I get better at talking about this so that other people get excited about the opportunity we have to fire the filibuster, right? Okay, so these are, now that we have touched on how to have these really, really crucial conversations in a landscape where we are lined up to really affect this change and fire the filibuster for once and for all. And so we need to relay that to folks. And there's so many ways that we can engage, right? I know that Moms Rising has a petition. Working Families is doing some phenomenal work around engaging in this. And I know the Democracy Initiative, we are pushing our partners to push out petitions. We want 1 million signatures to end the filibuster. I know Common Cause has over 250,000 signatures already. I think we're somewhere a little under 500,000 signatures, and we want to push that. We want to make sure that we're putting pressure and that we're showing that Americans are paying attention now. The filibuster is not too complicated and too confusing for us to engage around demanding that it ends so that we can advance the issues that matter to us. Right? We're paying attention. We are invested in our democracy, and these are ways that we can engage, right? Folks can call their Congress members. I know we're focusing on Congress members who are not confidently standing on firing the filibuster, like Congressmember Sinema in Arizona and Congressmember Manchin in West Virginia, putting pressure on your Congress member if you're not in those states to ensure that they are in line and they're on the same page with their constituents is super key. And then, because learning is an ongoing thing, come to a full Democracy Initiative training. We're happy to organize these and work with anyone who wants to learn more about the filibuster and Senate governance and why it matters. And we're happy to tailor those to you and your team. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm open. We're excited. I live and breathe training. And so definitely just connect with us. And we will happily engage and support any work that you all are doing. And remember, democracy, a true democracy, can only be for the people, by the people. I just want to thank all of you for participating today, and I look forward to engaging with you all in this movement going forward. I'm going to turn it back over to the good Reverend Doctor to close us out. Thank you so much for being here.
Did I not tell you she was a powerhouse? We are so truly grateful for the phenomenal Brittany Baxter and the training that she has provided for us this afternoon. We know that there's still questions and people are concerned about again, how do I get in this conversation? How do I talk to my barber? How do I talk to my neighbor? We want to answer those questions. As she pointed out, we did a wonderful white paper explaining the filibuster with Demos, Just Democracy, and Truth and Conciliation. So that is available. That is a tool that is available if you want to learn more about the filibuster. But we're going to take a short break and come back here and just answer questions for you. So whatever you have, put them in the chat. We want to just have conversation and answer the questions that you have so that you could go out today and start having conversations about firing the filibuster and moving our democracy forward. We need to fix our Senate now. So come back after our short break and we'll answer the questions that are looming in your mind. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Hopefully you participated in one of our earlier trainings on the filibuster and why we need to engage aggressively to fire the filibuster and move forward to advance the interests of not just progressives, but of all Americans. My name is Brittany Baxter. I'm the Training and Movement Building Coordinator at the Democracy Initiative. And today I am honored to have the good Reverend Dr. Stephanie Spalding, the founder of the Truth and Conciliation Commission, here with us. So, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Just saying hello. It's so great to be with you. It's just been an amazing day, and it is definitely a conversation that we need to keep having until the filibuster is fired.
Amen. Amen. So, folks, here's how it's going to work today. I'm going to start off asking the good Reverend Doctor some questions, and then we will start taking questions from the audience. So please type them in the chat as you think of them. We have a few here already set up, but let's dive in. This is the time to ask any question that you have about all things filibuster. But I'm going to start because I too have questions. First, I would just like, if you could just start with just like a kind of a brief background of your organization, why you founded it, and then just tell us a little bit about how the filibuster plays into the work that you're doing.
Awesome. So the name of our organization is the Truth and Conciliation Commission. And for those who are into racial justice work, anti-racism work, a lot of us are familiar with Truth and Reconciliation projects. South Africa was the first Truth and Reconciliation commission that was done after the fall of apartheid. What is different about the United States and what we recognize here, and I'll just point out that the United States as a nation has never done anything like this. And what is different is the reality that reconciliation, the language, the term itself, means that there's an agreement. There was an agreement that we can go back to, right? If you think about relationships, you think about a marriage, trying to reconcile that relationship. At one point, there was an agreement. In the United States, when it comes to racial justice, when it comes to white racial violence, there has never been an agreement. So our first truth is to acknowledge that the very foundation of the United States is in white racial violence. And if we're going to unearth that, if we're going to change the fruit that is being produced, then we have to dig in the soil and deal with that reality of who we are as a nation in order to become who we want to be. So that is the focus of the work of the Truth and Conciliation Commission. We are calling for a federal commission from a grassroots space, right? We are also saying that we don't have to wait for Congress to give us a commission. We can begin to do this work in and of ourselves. So when we talk about the filibuster, we really are talking about a broken democracy. Most people think that we have been in a democracy forever. And the reality is we live in a democratic republic that has not been so democratic until after the Civil Rights Voting Act was passed, right? Because democracy means that the majority of people get to play and have access to the governance that we are experiencing. But we have a broken democracy right now. As we think about the filibuster, you really have minority control governing the United States. And people don't recognize that because they're like, I go to the polls every midterm election. I go to the polls every 4 years and elect a president. But what happens after we elect individuals and the power that gets distributed in Congress is so skewed that it really is controlled by a minority, and the Senate is part of that problem.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That's really powerful work that you're doing, and it's absolutely necessary, right? As I said before in our other trainings, in our other sessions, the Democracy Initiative is positioned to apply a race class analysis to democracy work, which traditionally is a white male space. Because the folks who are most impacted by the way our democracy is structured these days, from its inception, have not been white men. It is folks who are farthest removed from that reality, who are the most impacted, who suffer the most, and who are excluded. And so our work is to ensure that we are pulling in those folks and shaping strategy around, and engaging intentionally folks who have not been able to participate, because they're the ones who tell us how the democracy we're trying to create, or not trying to, we are fighting to achieve, can be created and what needs to be included. So I have another question for you. This is an incredible question from a participant in our introductory training. So these anti-voter laws and et cetera must be considered unconstitutional at some point. If that's the case, then aren't these authors betraying the oath of office they swore to protect the Constitution? And if so, can't they be charged with that betrayal and then removed from office?
That is a great question. And if you are asking me as just a regular citizen, absolutely. They are betraying their oath of office. And we're seeing it not just at the state level, but at the federal level. However, in order for them to be called on the carpet, we have to have leaders in Congress again, whether it's the state legislature or in Congress, we have to have leaders to actually call them on that. We saw the battle for censure that happened after January 6th, but we are now also looking at the spin that the GOP is putting on the narrative of January 6th and saying that these were just, everyday random tourists. And if you didn't know that video was the video that it was, then it could have just been any day in Washington, D.C. So you have actually elected officials who are not just betraying what the Constitution represents, they are betraying the American trust by espousing this language. But we need individuals who have the leadership and the courage to actually call them out on it and then to hold them accountable. Otherwise, we're just frustrated citizens sitting at home on our couch, looking at our Zoom, looking at our 24/7 cable network news, being angry because we're not in that position to call them and hold them accountable.
Right. That's a really powerful statement. And it's very disempowering to feel as if you're helpless in this and you have no control over how to move these folks. But we in the progressive movement know that all it takes is a little bit of people power to put pressure on these folks. So you mentioned leaders willing to stand up. So I have a question about who we should be pressuring more around the ending the filibuster. Is it Congressmember Schumer from New York, or is it Congressmember Sinema and Congressmember Manchin from respectively Arizona and West Virginia?
Every last one of them. Every last one of them needs to be pressured to actually do their job. And that's what the filibuster represents. This rule that disallows senators to actually vote, right? So people are in this position getting paid almost $200,000 a year by taxpayers to not take a vote. We sent you to office to literally just vote. So we need to be pressuring everyone. I say no sleep till Brooklyn, right? Just everybody needs to know how frustrated we are as the American populace with senators not doing their job. And so Chuck Schumer could handle this today if he desired. He could literally call a session tomorrow on a Sunday and handle this and end the filibuster. But again, I say no one gets any sleep until we fire the filibuster.
I love it and I agree. I think we need to be making sure that if we don't have any justice, they don't have no peace.
Yes.
Right? So, I love that, right? It really is. It's like putting pressure where you can, everywhere you can, to make it unbearable for them to continue to function in their system that doesn't serve us. So I have another question for you. Is there a specific Senate committee that should be pressured to holding hearings and moving the rule to eliminate the filibuster?
I mean, again, if we wanted to look at a committee, we could look at the Rules Committee, but you don't have to. Chuck Schumer could walk into the Senate today and do away with the filibuster. It's exactly what Mitch McConnell did. And I don't understand. I'm not going to say anything sexist or gendered, but I don't understand what's holding him back, right? From actually doing the job that he is not only elected by his constituents, but empowered by the party to do. So again, it doesn't even have to go through committee. The majority leader can do this by a simple majority vote.
Thank you so much. So can you just explain for folks how Mitch McConnell, could you just explain and give a bit of context for how Mitch McConnell weaponized the filibuster during his, what I like to call his reign of terror, right? From the 90s to until he was turned into minority leader by the people last year.
So,
thank you, Georgia.
Thank you, Georgia. Yes. And thank you, Black and brown folks who organized and stayed in those lines in Georgia. So again, the idea is that if a piece of legislation is coming forth to the Senate that nobody wants to, the filibuster creates the space where there can be endless debate so that the question is never called for anyone to actually vote on it. Nobody wants to deal with the frustration of endless debate, right? So they just assume in the Senate that if you do not already have 60 votes on lock, that we're not even going to advance this bill. What happens is that in these last congressional sessions, less than 1% of legislation actually was voted on. So it was just bills that people were writing, passing in the House that never even came out of committee or to the floor from the Senate because people assumed there's not 60 senators who's going to vote for it. We don't even have to talk about it. And what Mitch McConnell did was to pick and choose when to eliminate the power of the filibuster. So when it came time to advance a judge, it was like, there's no need to, we could do that by simple majority vote because we want to have in place the kind of judges that are going to represent our conservative values and that is going to skew the courts. So he did away with that, with the filibuster. When it came to legislation that impacted Black and brown people, like criminal justice reform, voting legislation to protect the expansion of the enfranchisement, he was just like, nope, we have to have a super majority in order to get to that, to even bring it to the floor. So there was just bills on top of bills on top of bills that sat on his desk and he wouldn't even consider them. He would not even allow the Senate to vote on them. And so that's how he weaponized the filibuster and weaponized his power in the Senate over his reign of terror.
So thank you for mentioning that because it brings me to a question about a bill named after one of the very few electeds that I hold in very high regard, the late great John Lewis. And so I'm going to just read some stats out for folks. So 70% of Americans support the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, H.R. 4, including a majority of Republican voters. But 41 senators representing 21% of voters can block it with a filibuster. Why hasn't there been any action from the Senate Majority Leader, who's now Chuck Schumer, to move that forward? And what does that mean for us as we continue to fight to pass H.R. 1, H.R. 4, and H.R. 51, which is to make D.C., to give D.C. statehood?
So I'm just going to speak from my own organizing activist political perspective of why Chuck Schumer has not moved in this way, or many Democrats previously, because power is so seductive. And what ends up happening is that we get these individuals in office that become so enamored by the power that they have been granted that they don't actually use the power that they have. What does that mean? So most are worried about, am I going to get reelected if I do this, right? Or what is this going to look like for the dynamics of the party if I do this? And unfortunately, on the Democratic side, we have individuals who believe in the idea of diplomacy winning out. And in a normal society that advances civics and civility, I would encourage diplomacy. But we're dealing with a GOP that does not give a dang about anything and has demonstrated that they will forego all forms of ethics, that they will forego all forms of ethics and reality and truth in order to advance their agenda. So you're not playing with rational beings. You're not playing with people who value logic and reason and want to actually civilly work out being on different sides of a perspective or of an issue. And so these individuals like Chuck Schumer haven't done anything because they don't know who they're playing with. And they keep, focusing on this, but in the future, it will get better. And they just keep getting played year after year. And I am ready for individuals like Cori Bush to be leaders and, having the power that these people are not utilizing in their respective roles.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I do think, I think that there is a disconnect in this idea of being a statesman as opposed to recognizing that the party that we're facing now is not the party of 30, 40 years ago, right? It is not conservative values. It is about sustaining power and holding on to it as this country's demographic shift, which is like fostering this fear of like the death of whiteness, right? Of the death of white power as we know it, which we recognize that is not necessarily going to happen in the way they think it is. So that is a
say that I have done work on Christian nationalism and have spoken about Christian nationalism. And the thing that shocked me the most, the revelation that has shocked me the most is, unfortunately, progressives think that they're radical and they get gaslit in media as radical. The reality is this current GOP is truly radical, and they are utilizing the language and the practice and even the platform of Malcolm X by any means necessary, better than any progressive agenda group, organization ever. And they are really doing the radical work in the most obtuse and demeaning way to our democracy.
Yeah, wow. Oof, that's powerful. That is so powerful. My next question is, how do we move forward, right? Because I think that like with the filibuster, like firing the filibuster is not a cure-all, but how much of an impact would firing the filibuster actually mean for Senate governance and our ability to advance issues that matter to the American people?
So firing the filibuster is an absolute must, and it has to happen today as opposed to tomorrow. Like, it has to happen now. We keep talking about this allure of power and positioning for years to come. Unfortunately, what Democrats believe is that they will make it to midterms, that they will make it another year and a half, and to regain or reclaim. We will not be in this position again when it comes to the next midterm election cycle if we do not move past the filibuster right now. We are in a place that we have to run legislate. We have the ball. You got to run it. You have to run this ball all the way through to, to the goal, because we're not going to have it again. We're not going to have it again. So for those who are organizing, please continue to call on your legislators, especially in the Senate, and to call on every last one of those legislators. Support those who have shifted their position. We didn't even have at the start of this 100-day term for Biden, it wasn't even 40 plus senators who were openly talking about eliminating the filibuster. But there are so many now on board because they realize how much you care about eliminating the filibuster. So call on your representative, your senators, call on Chuck Schumer and make sure that we are sending a message that Americans, regardless of party, want their legislators to get up every day and do their jobs.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go back to a question, to a response that you posed to a question I asked about Schumer not moving in the same way that McConnell did. Because I do think that we do face this. One of the barriers that we face as progressives is that we do have a moral compass, at least like a general direction that we try to move in. And so there are some limitations to what we're willing to do. And so how could we push him to navigate in that way without creating another Mitch McConnell? Is it possible?
I'll say this. When I was in undergrad, I'm a member of one of the Divine Nine sororities, but when I was in undergrad, I had so much criticism about what I saw on my campus at the time. And I remember an elder fraternity brother saying to me, you could stand on the outside and complain about what you see all day long and yap about how they aren't doing this, that, and the third. But until you have membership, you are not changing anything. So I'll say this to Mitch McConnell, that the fear of, well, what happens when the GOP regains power? You are giving them power by not using yours in this moment. So you won't, like the narrative of becoming another Mitch McConnell, it won't even matter if you don't do anything in this moment.
Absolutely. I would love for all of our electeds to engage in lame duck president energy. Just move, push forward, push us through, and let's keep going, because there is so much at stake. I wonder what would the timeline be if we were able to push Majority Leader Schumer to host a session, to run up to actually push through a vote? What would the timeline be for that taking effect? And then what are the first 3 bills that you would advocate pushing through once we fire the filibuster?
A lot of people are saying that this has to happen before the August recess, that we have to get rid of the filibuster before the August recess and push through legislation. Definitely for the People Act. We have got to do everything that we can to protect voting rights in the United States from a federal position. We also have to get the George Floyd bill passed. We need criminal justice reform, and we need criminal justice reform immediately. And then lastly, the other piece of legislation that I would absolutely make sure that happens is DC statehood. There are 700,000 Black and brown people, or, essentially, that are disenfranchised and do not have representation in Congress because they do not have statehood. There are more people in Washington, D.C. than there are in the state of Wyoming. And your presentation, if you haven't seen the training, go back and watch the training, talks about the level of power that Wyoming has over places like California, Illinois, and definitely DC. So DC statehood.
Thank you so much for bringing up all of those democracy reform bills, because again, that is so close to my heart and the work that we're doing every day. And really, I do think it's important to uplift that race class analysis that we strive to bring to this work, because it's so necessary. Democracy being talked about in a silo is part of how we got here, right? Not engaging and interacting with those for whom democracy has long been deferred is how we continue to fail moving this work forward. I really, really appreciate you coming and just sharing your brilliance today. What are some takeaways that you want folks to have from this conversation, and how can folks plug in?
Absolutely. And thank you for your amazingness, your energy, and just everything that you are doing. I am so glad that I have another sister friend in the world of democracy reform now. Again, major takeaways: have the conversation. Do not be afraid of the filibuster because you think you're not a policy wonk. The Demos Just Democracy and Truth and Conciliation brief that we did will help you have this conversation with your barber. Have the conversation. People need to know how it's impacting our everyday lives. Secondly, make sure you are applying that pressure to your representatives in Congress, both the House and the Senate. We also, and when I say the House and the Senate, yes, it's a Senate issue, but we need House members to be pressuring their colleagues and saying, look, you don't get that. Like, I show up to work, I have to vote on bills. You need to vote on bills, you know? So definitely engage your representatives in both the House and the Senate. And then lastly, plug into the work that Democracy Initiative is doing. Come back for training. Bring your friends for training. Bring your moms and dads to the trainings. Make sure that you're signing the petitions that are circulating. So again, these representatives, these senators know that this is not just a small piece of America asking for this. There are millions of us asking to fire the filibuster. And then plug into the work of these organizations every day. You can find us at truthandconciliation.org. Again, plug into Demos, plug into Just Democracy, Democracy Initiative, all of these wonderful organizations, Moms Rising, and help us do this work.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Spalding. This has been such a phenomenal day that I've got to spend with you. I am honored, and I appreciate what you bring to this work. It's so important to engage authentically folks who don't get to participate and don't feel welcome into the democracy space, because democracy is for all of us, right? I look forward to working with you and moving this forward and firing the filibuster this year, because I know we can do it, y'all. There are many of us and few of them. So stay in touch with all of us. Reach out if you're interested in more training. We're happy to teach you if you are comfortable with having those conversations. That's what I do all day. So reach out and stay engaged. Remember that this fight is not just for any group of us. It's for us to really make sure that as we move forward, we have what I like to call a FUBU democracy, a for us, by us democracy, because the one that is documented in the Constitution excludes the majority of Americans today. And so remember, keep in mind, HR 1, HR 4, HR 51, and let's get some liberation and justice for all this year, y'all. Thanks for participating today, and enjoy the rest of your day.